Hello and welcome to this session. We'll first have a look at the passage that gives you the rules, and then we'll look at the questions once we're done with this. Okay, the rules say that a company employee generates a series of 5-digit product codes in accordance with the following rules. And then you have the rules, okay? So the first rule says that the codes use the digits 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and no others, okay? The next rule says that each digit occurs exactly once in any code. Okay, let's look at the next rule. It says that the second digit has a value exactly twice that of the first digit. Now let's try to understand this by drawing it down. Okay, so here you have the 5-digit code, the 5 spots that you have in here. Okay, it says that the second digit, which means that when you're talking about this spot, it has twice the value of the first digit. Now let's think of it like this. Let me draw these for you separately here. So let's say this is the first digit, okay? And here you have the second digit, okay? Now, what are the options that we have? We have the options of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, when you look at this pair in here, okay, so you have this pair of first and second. Now, what are the possibilities that you can have in here using these? What are the possibilities that you can have for the first and the second? Well, can you have 0 and 1? Can you have, well, maybe 2 and 3? Of course not, because what you need is that the first digit multiplied by 2 should give you the second digit, right? In such a case, you can see here that there are only two possibilities for the first and the second digit, right? Either you can have 1 in here, in which case you will have 2 in the second position, okay? So that's the first possibility. Let me just write that down here. The first possibility is that you have 1 here and 2 here. The second possibility, and the only other possibility, is that you can have 2 in here and 4 here, which means that the second possibility is that you have 2 and 4, okay? There is no other possibility. You can try this out by yourself. There is no other combination that you can have, okay? So once you have this in place, you've understood this rule well. Let us go ahead and look at the last rule. The last rule says that the value of the third digit is less than the value of the fifth digit. So the third digit, this one, has a value that is less than the fifth digit. Let me now represent that for you. So let's say we can use a lesser than sign. So I put this like this here, and you know that this is less than this. Okay, so you have this in place. Now, we've basically been able to make a diagram for all of these rules here. So let us use this diagram for the questions that follow so that we don't need to look back at the rules again and again. It is important to draw a good diagram because once you have a good diagram, you don't need to look back at the rules again and again. Let us go ahead. Starting with question number 1. Like I said, we will be using this diagram for every single question in this set, okay? Now let's read the question. It says that if the last digit of an acceptable product code is 1, it must be true that, okay, and then you have the options in here. Let us first try to see what happens when we put 1 as the last digit. So let me say I put 1 here. Now, you know that the positions 1 and 2 could have only 2 possible options. Either it is 1 and 2 or it is 2 and 4. Now if 1 is here, it definitely means that the first option is not available, right? You can't have the first option, which means that definitely you have 2 and 4 as the first 2 digits. Now the moment you understand this, you can find the answer here, because if you know that 2 and 4 are the first and second digit, right, you can find the answer that it has to be true that the first digit is 2. So the answer to this is A. Let's move to the next question. Question number 2. Which one of the following must be true about any acceptable product code? Okay, and now as you can see these options in here, it talks about the relative positioning, about which one comes first and which one comes later. Kind of like, you know, if something is before or something is after, okay? So let us first try to see as to what has to be first and what has to be later before we even look at the options, okay? So if you see this here, you can see that the options that you have for the first two positions, right? You have that in here. You can have only 1, 2, and 4 in here, okay? The more important thing, the fixed thing that you can see is that 2 can be either in this position or in this position. 2 cannot be elsewhere because we have only 2 possible cases. Like I said, any pattern either has to begin with 1 and 2 or it has to begin with 2 and 4. Okay, so that means 2, the number 2 is always going to be in the positions 1 and 2 only. Now, this looks like a number that is going to stay behind or before, right? That's how I start off. And then when I look at the options, you can see that, hey, if you can have only 1, 2, and 4 in here, right, to the left of this line, which means that to the right of this line, you're going to have the 0 and the 3 for sure, right? So you can see from here that 2, since it's always here, like 2 is always here, and 0 and 3 are always here, you know that definitely 2 is behind 0 and 3. And you can see that in the option C, which says that the digit 2 appears in some position before the digit 3. Question number 3. If the third digit of an acceptable product code is not 0, then which one of the following must be true? So it says that the third digit, this one, is not 0. Okay? It says that this is not 0. Now you know that you don't have a 0 in here. Okay? And you also know that this last digit in here has to be larger than this number. Now anything that is larger than something cannot be the lowest number. So the fifth position cannot be the lowest or the smallest number, right? Which means that the fifth position cannot be 0. So if this is not 0, you don't have a 0 in here, then definitely you know that this position has to be 0. The fourth position has to be a 0. And that gives you the answer, C. Let us move ahead to the next question. Question number 4. Any of the following pairs could be the third and the fourth digits, respectively, of an acceptable product code, except, let's first try to understand as to what the question means. Now, the third and the fourth positions are these, right? These are the third and the fourth positions. It tells you now that out of these 4 options, 3 of them could be acceptable product codes, and one of them, right? One of them is not acceptable, and this is the exception. So we are looking for the one option that does not fit in, okay? We're looking for the option that is not acceptable, okay? So let's start option by option, one by one. Let's put them in and let's see which one works, okay? So we begin with option A. Option A reads 0 and 1. So let me put 0 and 1 in here because that's what you have in option A, okay? And let's see if it is acceptable. If it is acceptable, then it is not the right answer, which means that, let's say it works out to be, hey, it's okay. It means it is not the answer. So let me say I have 0 and 1 in here, okay? Now if 1 is in here, that means we definitely have 2 and 4 in here, because that's what we saw, because this is not happening. So we have 2 and 4. That means you have 3 here. Now, when you look at this entire arrangement, here, does this look acceptable to you? Yes, there's no problem. It is acceptable, which means that A is not the answer, okay? Let's look at option B, okay? Now option B says 3 and 4, okay? We're looking at option B. Let me write 3 and 4 down in here now, okay? 3 and 4. Now if you have 3 and 4 in here, that means you've got the 4 here, which means that the first two positions are 1 and 2, and that leaves 0 for the last position. And we just saw in the previous question that 0 cannot be in position number 5, which means that this, hey, is not acceptable. And because it is not acceptable, this is the right answer. So B is the answer. You can go ahead and try with the options C and D. You'll find that you can fit them in because they are acceptable. Let's move on. Last question of this set, question number 5. Which one of the following must be true about any acceptable product code? Now, as you can see in this question, it is talking about the distance, right, in terms of how many characters you have between any two numbers. For example, let's say you have 0. Let's talk about the first option. It says that there is 0 and then there is 1. Now, how many positions do you have in between this? Could it be 3? Could it be 2? Or is it exactly 1? Right? So that's what it's asking you. So let us first work out as to what the distances are like, right? Let's just give ourselves an idea, and then we'll go have a look at the options, okay? So one thing I need you to understand is that there are only two kinds of possibilities in here, okay? Either you're going to have 1, 2 in the first and second position, and then you have these 3 positions. Or the second option is that you have 1 and 2, and then you have the next 3 positions in here. So for the time being, let me just kind of hide this so that we don't get confused, okay? So you have only these 2 possibilities. Everything has to be one of these 2 possibilities. Now, you also know that 0 has to be either this position or this position, because you know that 0 cannot be in the last position, okay? And you also know that likewise, because this has to be lesser, you know that this position cannot be 4, okay? Because you see this has to be less than this position, so the position 3 cannot be the largest, right? So now that you've kind of seen this, what are you going to do with the options? It says which one must be true, which means which of these is true in all situations, which of these is always true, right? Sometimes some things are always true. Sometimes some things are sometimes true. What that means is sometimes some things are sometimes false, right? So when we're looking at this in here, we need to know that the wrong options, right, are sometimes false, okay? So the moment we can see that an option is sometimes false, it means that it is not always true. I want you to understand this. When you say that something must be true, it means that it is always true. And something which is sometimes false is not always true, okay? So we will try to see for each of the options whether it is possible for us to know if this could sometimes be false. So for example, we will ask ourselves when we look at option A, hey, is it possible for A to be false? If the answer to that is yes, it means it is not our answer. All right? We'll do that with every option. So it says there is exactly one digit between 0 and 1. So let me take the first example, the first sentence, the first option in here, okay? And let me just put 0 in here, okay? So I can put 0 in here, and then I can put 3 here, and I can put 4 here. Now, as you can see, look at the distance between 0 and 1. You have two things in between it, right? Since you have two things in between it, it means that, hey, this could be false, okay? Now, when you do this with each of the options, you'd find that you can do that with 3 out of the 4 options, but not with the 4th. Okay, so let's look at the next option. The next option says 1 digit between 1 and 2. So you have no space between 1 and 2 in here, like there's 0, no position, so this is wrong as well. This is false, okay? This is always false, actually. No, it's false in some of the cases. It's always false in the first case, but sometimes you can have it to be true. But like I said, you can show that sometimes it is false, right? So you can see here that there is not exactly 1 digit between these. There is 0 digits between these. There is no digit between these, so it's false, okay? Let's look at option C. It says there are at the most 2 digits between 1 and 3. At the most 2 digits between 1 and 3. So we're trying to see, hey, is it possible for there to be more than 2 digits between 1 and 3? So let us say 1 is in here. Is it possible for me to put 3 in here so that we can have a gap of 3? Yes, I can. What I can do is I can put 0 here and 4 here, and this is perfectly acceptable if you have a look at this, right? 1, 2, 0, 4, and 3 is totally acceptable. And here you can see that there's a gap of 3 between 1 and 3, which means that, hey, it is possible to say that this is sometimes false, which leaves us with only option D, which has to be the right answer, but let's just check that out before we actually mark it as the answer. So what it says, there are at the most 2 digits between 2 and 4. So as you can see in the second case, well, there are 0 digits, that works here. For the first case here, it says at the most 2 digits. Now look, you can put 4 either here, in which case you have 0 distance, or you can put 4 here, in which case you have only 1, or you can put 4 here, in which case you have only 2. That means it is always true that there are at the most 2 digits between 2 and 4.